turning to the special session, the legislature is now in the middle of, we've talked about this before, and whether CWU is ready to handle the cuts. It sounds like one of the proposals before the legislature is a 15% cut to higher education.
Correct.
First of all, and I've asked this before, but what does that mean for this year's budget?
Well, for this year's budget, if it's just that and there's not other sorts of parameters established to it, it will not make any, well, it makes a difference in this year's budget, but it won't have an effect on our operations. The trustees have authorized the release of rainy day funds into this year's budget and next year's budget, for that matter, to buffer the effects of the cutback in the state. Now, we don't know what the state is going to do, both in terms of the percent of cut we'll have to take or any strings they'll attach to that. But if it's 15% and if there are no strings, it should not have a significant impact on our operating budget this year or next year.
And some of that involves use of reserves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the rainy day fund I was referring to.
Okay. This
essentially, going back, it's not as if there's just closets full of money hidden around the campus. The requirement of the state or the necessity of the state to withdraw funds from us comes as no surprise to me or the trustees. For those of us who have been watching very closely the state tax revenues, but also the state obligations, what they call their caseload analysis, it was pretty clear that to everybody that we were going to find ourselves in this position. So the trustees have in essence budgeted for this eventuality, and unfortunately it's coming true. It would be wonderful to be able to invest the money that was budgeted in new programs, but this has been really since I arrived here almost 3 years ago now, we have been planning for this eventuality.
One of the other proposals was cuts to the state's work-study program.
That may well happen. I mean, I don't know, but I was actually talking today about that, and that's still on the budget. That still may happen. Yes.
How much could that affect students who are out working in our community and on campus?
Oh, well, it'll take one of their, for the most part, those work-study programs are students working on campus. It'll be gone. So either the university will have to find, and that's why I say there may be some strings attached to our budget, we either have to eliminate those positions, those jobs, and the students that fill them won't have those opportunities and those monies. So it's how are they going to pay for their tuition? Many people, it's not technically true, but many students think of work-study as a form of financial aid. It's not, it's a job, but from their perspective, it's largely the same thing, and they won't have that. So they're going to have to borrow more money, they're going to have to stop out, they're going to have to find jobs on the local economy. Those are harder and harder to find because of just the economic conditions. So it's going to have a tremendous impact, primarily on our students.
Okay. Second topic that the legislature is considering is kind of a, for lack of a better term, bailout of the Toyota Town Center in Wenatchee.
Yeah, correct.
And CWU has some money invested in that.
We do, yeah. We're bondholders of that project.
About $1.6 million.
That's correct. Yeah.
It looks like the legislature is trying to work through a solution as of today, but what might this mean for CWU?
Well, it's a complicated answer to a very kind of straightforward question. Central Washington University has reserves or fund balances, positive. We technically don't have reserves as an accounting measure. We have positive fund balances. But we have them across the university, from housing and dining to parking to tuition accounts. Although there's lots of little funds around the academy, around the university that have to do with fund balances. And some of that goes for depreciation of equipment and so forth. But we invest those dollars collectively. So any given, say, bond purchase might have a little bit from the tuition fund balance, a little bit from the housing fund balance. So when we find out, and we don't know yet if there's going to be a default, if the default will be passed to the bondholders, and what the amount of that is, then we'll have to proportion those costs essentially against the accounts that comprise it in proportion to their composition. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and it's not uncommon for an institution like CWU or any sort of public institution to hold that kind of investment.
It's in fact, it's common. It's generally thought of to be the most secure kind of of financing, and these were all received the highest possible rating. So it's not that it's uncommon, it's in fact common. Some universities that have more aggressive policies will actually go into equity accounts, will go into the stock market. Central Washington hasn't done that because of volatility. This is thought to have been the safest, best way of getting earnings, but also securing the principal.
So if there's a default, what happens?
If there's a complete default, and it could be the city could decide to continue to pay the bondholders. They could decide to pay a percentage to the bondholders, or they could decide to default completely, in which case we would lose the money.
Okay. Anything else brewing in the legislature folks should know about?
I think those are the main issues. Well, I guess there is one that probably won't be of great interest to people, but there's this coming year they will begin to reconstitute the governance system for higher education. The Higher Education Coordinating Board was dissolved by the last legislature, and with the hope that it will be reconstituted, recreated, some form of it, in this coming legislature. So that won't happen during special session, but that will certainly happen in the regular session next year.
So people should keep an eye on that.
I think it's worth keeping an eye on. There's citizen well, there has always been citizen representation. I suspect there still will be on what's called the Higher Education Coordinating Board. The Higher Education Coordinating Board is actually a citizen body, and then there's a staff that supports that activity, or that board. So that board is going to be reconstituted. So I think if I was a citizen of the state and wanted a voice in higher education, I would absolutely watch that process.
Okay. Back on campus, CWU's Academic Planning Task Force released recommendations this week about what programs should be maintained, reduced, or eliminated.
Correct.
Obviously, this probably has a lot of interest on campus.
I'm sure it does, yes.
But maybe just for the general public, too, to explain what that is and what it might mean for campus operations.
Absolutely will. And I want to, if I can, and I mean this in the most sincere and honest way, disassociate it with our previous conversations about the budget cuts. We actually started this process in 2009, really before we knew the severity of the budget cuts. And it's something that all universities do periodically. You take a holistic look at all of your programs, really for the purpose of making sure you're offering the best possible educational opportunities to your students, and that you're making the most effective use of funds. So this is a process that we did start in better times, and that we would do if the state was lavishing money on us and tuition were being reduced. We would still go through these same processes. There's a little added urgency, without question, that we're in these difficult financial times, and it puts a slightly different cast on the effort. But it's a routine effort, and it's one that, at least while I'm president, we'll do periodically, regardless of our financial conditions. And its goals are to do just that, is to make sure we have the programs that we want, and that those programs are of high quality, and that we're using the resources, and both resources, financial resources, but every bit as importantly, our physical resources and our staff, which means faculty time, that we're using those effectively and efficiently. There's actually a fourth thing that the task force is going to be doing that they haven't done yet, and that's to look at programs that need to be enhanced. That is, what programs do we invest in? So we look at everything from elimination of programs that are no longer serving the purpose that they were designed to do, and or that don't fit the university's current trajectory, its pathway, and what programs should be either created or invested in, and then everything in between those two boundary levels. Thus far, it's been maintain, revise, and eliminate, but there'll be a fourth category as the task force continues to do their work, which is invest.
And it sounds like in terms of the process, they're now taking input on that.
Yes,
it's not final.
There was lots of input done. It was, for the most part, a data-driven process, an information-driven process, though last year we did there was lots of, if you will, subjective, qualitative input in terms of program quality. That's all been this group has put all that information together, and their recommendations are sent out for review by the academic departments with a format, a template for those programs to review. So we're far from done. The recommendations aren't scheduled to go before the Board of Trustees until May. So there's really a half an academic year left in the process.
Okay.